All right, so we're going to talk digital agriculture next. We've got Jake and Andrew Eyre here that are going to help set the stage for the group discussion. This is, I'll tell you, something that the digital agriculture is an issue, a topic that KAP we're diving into more and more often, working with some partners like Emily here in Manitoba, like farm groups across the country. It is this interesting space where there's a lot of potential to do more. I'm not sure that he's in the room right now, but Glenn Friesen was around, and I do want to give a good shout out to the province of Manitoba, because one of the points that we try and make in our work that we do is that we need governments to take digital ag issues more seriously, and it seems like Manitoba is one of the provinces that is out on front. But we'll get a little bit into that. But I want to start with Jake and Andrew with what I think is a really simple question, but that's a really big question. What is digital agriculture to you?
Well, digital ag to us on our farm is embracing technology that's available today. It means mostly an app-based system for me, something that we've familiarized ourselves with, being able to record keep, get information back when we need it in a timely fashion, utilize reports from the systems. That's what digital ag means to me, and it means it's transparency. It's kind of an independent party that's collecting our information, but it's there in our phone and it's available to us at any time.
So Jake, that sounds like more than a precision planter.
Yeah, just a little bit. And actually the irony of this is that, you know, Dad's always been an embracer of tech, and I pushed a little bit, but I think now he's more of a fan and utilizes it than me. We're really a fan of it on the farm. Like Dad alluded to, we use like John Deere Operations Center, so we can effectively track our placement of seed, fertilizer, herbicide, right to our harvest data. We've then taken it a step further. We've EC mapped the whole farm, and we're doing grid soil sampling. So we're trying to get as much efficiency from our fertilizer as possible. So we're, maximizing our better zones, and we're cutting back in our more inefficient zones, and also looking at projects like, is it even effective to seed some of these zones on the farm to high input crops like, canola, corn. But very much on the farm, it's something we're embracing every day and always looking for something new to try.
So Andrew, besides kind of the thrill of always trying something new, why do you actually do it? What's the point?
I think it's, I've always seen myself as a person that's on a mission. I want to make something better. I never come to a roadblock and think, that's the end of the road. It's like, how do I get around that roadblock? And, we just strive to be more efficient with what we do. And that may be in a situation with seed, more efficient nitrogen use, more efficient water use, all those things. If they're there and we're able to utilize them, now is the time to adapt.
But do you think that efficient means more profitable?
Yeah, profit comes into it, of course, but in production, we can only do so much, and we have to be a better producer and produce units as cheaply as possible. We have very little control over cost and very little control over the end user paying us what they want to. But we do have control over is production. So that's where I focus my energy.
And so Jake, what does this look like in practice on the farm? So what are the different tools that you're actually using at the end of the day?
So one of the ones I mentioned was, John Deere Ops Center. So we've got all of our yield data, our harvest data, the soil sampling. So from the soil sampling and our zone maps, we create a crop plan, and we're actually going down to the ton, exactly how much, say, nitrogen fertilizer we're needing. So we're trying to calculate exactly how much we're needing and be as efficient as possible with that, not over order, under order. And then also just kind of see where can we make improvements every year over year. Was there a product we tried that saw a return? Did we have a loss on that? And trying to identify, is there areas where we have consistent, say, salinity? Is that a result of topography? Is it nutrients? Like trying to figure out exactly where we can be more efficient with the resources that we have.
And so you've got kind of equipment that's got monitoring systems in it. You've done the soil mapping, and then you've got kind of a computer program that pulls that all together, right? Is that what that looks like?
Yeah, and so we don't operate the newest equipment either. I think the newest equipment we have is a tractor that's 7 years old. So retrofitting is something that people, maybe scoff at and think, oh, well, my equipment's too old. No, there is a lot of equipment that you can update and ensure. Like the combines are 2012. It's not new, but it's not old in the sense. Like there is that ability to update, and we have done that. We did that with one of the tractors that's 31 years old. We put, the brain, the computer into it, and then that then translates the data into the system. So there is that ability for, honestly, quite lower cost than what you would think it would be to get to that spec.
One of the things that we hear a lot about are issues around interoperability, right? Making these systems work together. Andrew, do you run into that issue when you're taking a tractor that's 30 years old and making it a smart tractor?
If you're running green, and everything's green, it's more compatible. Compatibility could be a big issue.
We're not sponsored by John Deere, just saying that.
No, that's right. It just happens that way. I mean, one of the things for me was to embrace the technology of VR. It was like, okay, a little skeptical here. How is this going to work? So our agronomist said, okay, so here's your weather station. At this weather station, based on my VR prescription this year, our wheat is going to yield 125 bushel. So I just laughed, we were just laughing. Okay, really, yeah. So this was our first go at it the first year. We swathed the crop backward and forth by the weather station, and as I was harvesting the swath, as I came up to the weather station, I held my camera up and I took a picture, and lo and behold, it was 125 bushels right at that spot. So we laughed about it. I sent the information to the agronomist. The following year, which was this year, we looked at it again. He said 75 bushels is what that weather station said at that location. Same thing happened again, exactly the same. Came up to it, took the picture, 75 bushels. Of course, it's not representative of the whole field, but the point was that we're making our decision based on technology, and technology does work. So that is really what's made me more and more sure that we're going down the road. We have to follow that information.
If I can touch on the interoperability question too, we did have this with the one aircraft. Remember, we had to get a bridge, they call it, which is basically it's an overpriced wire to ensure the machines to talk together. And then we had another instance where we were told, okay, this monitor will work with this. It didn't, but then there was a software update and it did. So I would say it is improving. There is the appetite for those systems to talk to each other on that side.
Right. Because the way that your dad just talked about it, right, was very glowing, right? This is technology that works, but it doesn't always work, right?
It doesn't always work, but I mean, honestly, it's regardless of what color of equipment it is, the dealer that you've got it from or whoever wants to have you working, they don't want to see it parked at the edge of the field or at the farm or on the lot. They have an appetite to work with you, even if it is not, at the end of the day, their product. We've been fortunate to find a way to make things work, and sometimes it just even takes a Google search or ask ChatGPT.
So what do you think of the barriers that are standing in the way? So you guys are kind of all in on this. What do you think the barriers that are standing in the way? And maybe if you could also speak to it kind of because there's a bit of a curve, right? It's one thing to go to VR, but you've gone as far as you're putting soil moisture meters in the ground too. So what are the barriers and how do you get people to move along that curve?
I think probably one of the biggest barriers, honestly, is knowing your exact cost of production. Where can you gain? Where can you lose? I know we talked about, people look at a weather station like the one that's in the photo here and say, okay, how can I actually gain or improve profitability on my farm? Our farm is spread out. We're between, I think our furthest fields is about 25 miles. So from a managerial side, if you're trying to decide what you're going to do on that day, you say pertinent to spraying, well, say in one weather station it shows a wind of 5 miles an hour, and then you go the other side and the wind is at 35 miles an hour. Well, by not having to drive out there and physically check that field and check conditions, you've saved yourself at least 2 to 3 hours of time in your day. So your managerial time, I mean, whatever your cost per hour is, but you are more effective with your time management. So you might not see a direct, return on investment in that sense, but your time efficiency improves, which in turn increases your profitability.
I just add to that, one of the functional aspects of the Ops Center with John Deere is the fact that I no longer need to phone those employees and say, okay, what's the fuel level in number 1 combine? What's the fuel level in number 2? Do you need any DEF? Because I can look on my phone in real time and I can see those things. All those little things, when you add them up, really make our life, to manage, whether you're managing 1,000 or 10,000 acres, it makes life so much easier.
So I guess to sum it up, it's, you know, the barrier could be, okay, well, it's the cost, and I'm not going to see a direct return on investment from putting in Moisture Pro, but it's understanding where you actually see the benefit from utilizing this practice.
And so we'll get into some questions for group discussion, and maybe like we did last time, if there are questions from the floor to start the group discussion off, we'll take 1 or 2 of them. But one of the things that is a big issue we hear a lot about is around right to repair. And I'm curious, you're all in on the green. Where does that kind of play into it, and how do you think that this works out when it comes to being able to get equipment fixed and get that done in an affordable, timely way?
For me, that's been one of the reasons for running slightly older equipment, because it's more simpler to manage, simpler to fix. If we get into engine and transmission, we will probably work with a dealer. But most of the other things that I can look at and say, yeah, it's just an electrical issue, it's a fuel pipe issue, then we can deal with those. But it is concerning that if we did lose that right to repair, where we'll go.
So there is, we were talking about this in our meeting, there is legislation that passed federally about right to repair and interoperability. I know that's something with KAP we've met with, you know, the different groups in the province about ensuring farmers have that right to repair, and I can quite honestly say I feel like the dealerships are on side with having a right to repair but just not right to modify. So they would want the farmer to be able to repair their equipment, because I don't really think they like getting a call at 5 o'clock on a Sunday screamed at saying, I can't run my tractor, I can't run my XYZ. They want you to be running, they want you to be efficient, but the right to modify is something that, you know, so you wouldn't have the ability to go into the OS system of the machine and you know, hack or modify the proprietary software.
Okay, are there any questions for Jake or Andrew before we get into the questions for the group? And we'll try and get them put up on the screen so you can take a look at it. Any questions for Jake or Andrew? Then we'll give you all your assignment for your tables. Again, please, the question should be on your table as well. Please take notes on them. But really, we've got kind of 4 themes. What's your experience been with digital tools and solutions? Have you been impacted by these right to repair or these interoperability challenges? What do you think that the future should be, and what should the priorities be for the future of digital agriculture? An interesting, I think, question here is, and maybe we'll get Jake and Andrew to answer this to really get into it. Interesting question is, if you could get a digital tool to fix something that you can't get a digital tool to fix today, what would you want that digital tool to do? So give you guys a minute to think about it. And the last one, if governments had $1 to spend, what would you want the government to spend it on? Right? And I think especially we're in this clear world of fiscal restraint. Governments are spending less, but if we could get governments to make some targeted investments related to digital agriculture, what would you like them to spend that money on? But Andrew, do you have an answer to this question? When you think about the future, what's a digital solution that you don't have yet that you'd like?
Well, one of the aspects for me, and wearing my hat as a national director for Canadian seed growers, is we have the ability to offer traceability of our seed right back to the breeder with a QRL code. We need the end users to pick up that information. We have the consumers at the end who want food safety. They want all the information, but our information is not being passed along. So that is a missing link for me. We need that traceability because that's what everyone demands. So that would be my hope for the future.
Jake, what about you?
Long list if I had my magic wand. But I think probably along with everyone in the room, one of the things is a digital tool, and I think we're getting there, and I not to tote these weather stations, but something that can more accurately predict our weather. You know, especially, I know you're not going to be able to predict, like we had the downpours and the deluges in southeastern and southern Manitoba in the summer, but trying to know exactly what our weather is going to do and more predictive, because if you're trying to manage your operation, planning out your day, planning out the hours, trying to figure out, okay, do I take that, say, wheat off at a little wetter moisture because I know there's going to be 6 inches of rain coming? I know it might be a big ask, but if that was my magic wand, it would be, certainty on the weather.
How many people would sleep better if you had certainty on the weather? Hopefully most. All right, so now you've got about half an hour. Take the time, answer your questions, and maybe we'll get Jake and Andrew to walk around if you've got questions for them. They'll help you think through your thoughts to these, and then we'll come back and talk as a group again. Does somebody want to share kind of what they see as the challenges or barriers that are standing in the way for them or their business? Anybody want to start the discussion off? Okay.
So I'm going to start by saying some of the challenges for digital tools for us is just general connectivity. Do we have good cell service? Can we actually upload information from our combines, tractors, whatever it is, up to the cloud? And can we increase reliability with satellite connections? So I think sometimes we get too deep into the meat of it and have to think big picture and think just general connection.
Yeah, some of our big issues have been big promises and underwhelming results. Where like drones are one, for example, where they're going to be revolutionary, and I think they will be. But at this moment, we're kind of in that trough of disillusionment. They're more of, for me on my farm, they're more of a nuisance than they don't bring enough value for me. But we've also seen some revolutionary things like auto steer and yield monitors on the farm. But I mean, also our yield monitors on the farm, they sat in the combine for probably 10 years before we did anything with the data, right? So it's all good and bad at times.
So I'm going to pick on the yield monitors piece. So is that the problem, the technology or the user, or like is that a skills gap that exists? How do you think about that?
Yeah, we were discussing the issues usually between the seat and the steering wheel. No, it is often, it takes time, right, to figure out these things and to make it work. And sometimes there's just so much data that how do you make it worthwhile? And so I toured a dairy this summer, and they have thousands of cattle, and they have millions of data points every day, and they were saying that they come in and most of it's just noise, they ignore it, but there's 6 or so points that they look at and they say, okay, this animal's likely going to be sick, so we need to manage it, right? So it's wading through the data and finding a tool that refines it maybe down enough that it makes it useful for us.
So Jacob, I'm going to come back to you because you started earlier when we asked about what is digital agriculture with a discussion about kind of that data and that app piece. But I think we also have kind of lots of questions around data ownership and privacy and kind of how do we, not just a matter of how do you use it, how do you protect it, how do you think about it? How do you understand what's the 6 data points that matter, what's the noise, what's not? And then how do you think about who owns the data, how do you protect it, how it's used?
So I guess getting to that, like Colin said, about what is those points of data, honestly, if data wants to jump into it, but for us it was trial and error. It was kind of, you have the information and then taking the time to actually look through it. I mean, I think we're all guilty of whatever you do on the farm. If you pay something, sometimes you don't entirely utilize the benefits of it. So it was, hey, we're paying for this. Maybe we should actually sit down and look at what we're getting from it. So just taking the time to go from there. And then as far as the data and the ownership and the usage agreement piece, I know the KAP board, we met with the Ag Data Transparent group, and so that is a group, they are US-based, but they act as kind of a go-between between the organization and then the producers. So again, just it's what I know, and they specifically mentioned like Operations Center from John Deere. So they met with John Deere and they asked them a list of questions, and then they post those questions on this website, and it says, it's point blank, who owns the data? Do you have the right to distribute it? And to get Ag Data Transparent certified, a company has to go back and forth with this group and be able to answer all of those questions. So a lot of the major ones, Operations Center, Field View, if you're doing, I think, seed production with Bayer and Syngenta, they're on there too. So a lot of these kind of big groups are already on there, and you know, if that's a group that you work with and they're not on there, that's something that a farm could push for. Say, hey, can you get Ag Data Transparent certified? And I believe the Canadian Seed Growers Association as well is another one that's been Ag Data certified. Second point, there's a lot of programs out there with digital ag involved. There's like carbon offset, carbon inset. There's all these programs out there. My advice to you would be, if you're working with someone and you are unsure of the data rights and the data ownership, be point blank and ask. Ask that entity, ask that individual, who owns my data? What is the agreement? I've had personal experience with a group where I point blank said, what's going on with my data? Who owns it? And I said, do you have an NDA? Do you have a contract? And they did, and we signed it, and we went from there. I've had other experiences where you ask that question, and the individual runs for the hills. So if they run for the hills, probably not something I want to work with. So that would be my ending point on that.
Okay, other comments, thoughts? Yep.
A lot of discussion around use of data, but I think there is a fundamental problem that we need to deal with in the equipment industry before we can really make good use of that data, and that's the issue of interoperability, especially if you're running multiple brands of equipment. You know, in Jake's example, they're using the John Deere system, so if you have one brand of equipment, it works pretty ubiquitously. One talks to the other. But if you've got various brands of equipment, even though there is an ISO bus standard for a connector and a communication system, that doesn't ensure interoperability. And I think we need a system so that producers are insured when they buy a piece of equipment, regardless of what brand it is, that when they hook up to it, it works. It's not, oh, maybe 5 of the 6 or 5 of the 20 features work. It should work smoothly. Right now, that's not what we're dealing with, so the reality is a lot of producers are running one brand of monitor to run the tractor, they've got another brand of monitor operating the drill, something else running the sprayer, and there's absolutely no need for that. We're spending thousands of dollars on electronics and monitors to perform a function where one monitor should be able to do it all. And I think we need to get past that basic hurdle before we can get to the stage of really having meaningful use of data. Because until we can collect that data smoothly, if we've got bits and pieces of data from different systems or is talking a different language, we can't make good use of that data. So I think there's hurdles we need to cross before we get to the point of using data.
So how many people run a mixed fleet and have run into interoperability issues? Lots of people in the room, so not everybody's diehard green. And the other thing to keep in mind, right, is that it's not just your equipment line, it's your fertilizer, your soil tests, all of these other different sorts of data that need to get pulled into. Well, come over here.
Thank you. A lot like Colin Peters said, there's really some good things, and there's some things that are just cause a lot of frustration. And but the one thing that I keep stumbling over is particularly with variable rate is how to measure you actually get a response. And Ag Canada Brandon did an interesting study north of Brandon on some rolling soils, and they identified a low yielding area, a high yielding area, and a medium yielding area. They sampled on each site and then did a 50%, 100%, and 150% nitrogen application. And what they found out was that the low yielding site needed 150%, the medium area needed 100%, and the highest yielding area only needed 50%. But when they actually looked at how much fertilizer that was, it was almost all the same. There's a lot of factors. Dr. Flayton and one of his grad students recently decided that the best formula to use for predicting the nitrogen requirements of wheat was 2.2 pounds per bushel of wheat less the soil. But I think they also showed that 1.5 works sometimes and 3 is necessary sometimes. Edgar Hammermeister from Western Ag Labs suggests that if you have a dry period and then you get a rain, you get a flush of nitrogen and you get a yield that you never would have expected. And in terms of using the yield monitor, I can get 125 bushels per acre, but I don't have to fertilize to get that. It's already there, and it's based on probably the soil somewhere in between where it drowns out and it doesn't drown out. And there's sometimes it's residual nitrogen, sometimes it's the organic matter. Dr. Dave Franzen from North Dakota State University has found that if you zero till for at least 6 years continuously, you can get a 50 bushel or 50 pound per acre nitrogen credit on wheat. So, there's a lot of factors that go into this, and, variable rate, I just haven't figured it out. We're doing it, but I'm not sure that it's worthwhile. Thanks.
Other thoughts or comments? Because I think that partly gets at thinking about solutions too, right? Because it's not just a matter of a combine that's got a yield monitor on it or a variable rate technology in kind of the spring, but it's about how do you put this all together and how to use it the best way possible to get the most out of it, recognizing that the most out of it is going to maybe be different from farms. So kind of the question at the end, I think, is hopefully a straightforward one. If you were in government and you had $1 and you wanted to help digital agriculture, or maybe you were government and you had $100 or $100 million, but you had to spend it all on one thing, what would you spend it on? And I see Eric at the back. Before I go to Eric at the back, somebody else has got kind of thoughts as to where they'd put that money if government had to invest it in one thing? Yep, we got a couple of things here, and I'll make my way to Eric at the back.
So what we were talking about, if they could put that $1 into something, would probably be broadening the bandwidth and expand the cellular accessibility for communities with poor or zero cellular or satellite connection. Because if you have all this expensive equipment that requires your satellite connection and you don't have it, why would you buy it in the first place?
Okay, we've got, I think somebody back here had one too.
As far as digital agriculture goes, I think the government needs to work with industry, whether it's through collaboration or a combination of legislation, to come up with a standard operating policy for all this equipment so that it does work smoothly regardless of the brand.
Okay, other thoughts around kind of one things government could or should do? I'm going to make my way back here to Eric, who had something. And then, we've got somebody up here.
I think it's a double-edged thing, but around proprietary tools to make sure that, A, they're fixable by third parties, and B, they can be fixable or replaced over a 20-year period, not available in 5.
Okay, anything else on kind of solutions? Come back to Eric to get his take on it. Glenn, maybe you could tell us after what government's actually going to spend the money on?
Yeah, thank you. So maybe thinking kind of a couple of the themes that I've heard already today. So whether it's the ability to make use of the data, maybe you haven't looked at it in 10 years, or trying to understand where variable rate is, trying to understand whether compatibility exists between tractor and implement. So often when I think of digital ag, we tend to think it's about innovation. What I tend to think about is industry standards. So a lot of these tools already exist, right? Whether they're implemented or not is the question, right? So I think you brought up ISOBUS, right? So we think about the Agricultural Industry Electronics Foundation as this group of over 300 members across the world who work across brand lines to solve these problems, right? So when I think about what is missing in Western Canada? Why aren't we adopting, why aren't we reaching the industry standards that already exist? And we really haven't had a reason to for a long time. I think trade conflict changes that equation, right? We saw the first pavilion at Agritechnica from the Ag Manufacturers of Canada, and that made a really bold statement to the world saying there's a need for the short-line manufacturing sector to go and expand into new markets. Europe is where ISOBUS, where the AEF standards emerged from. So there's this interesting parallel. There is this pain if you're a mixed fleet farmer. Now there is an opportunity for this market to grow into new functionality. So we could solve potentially both problems at once. So when I think about what to spend money on, the question is more, is the pain that farmers experience around compatibility, around data exchange, large enough that you are willing to talk to your dealers or talk to the manufacturers themselves and say, hey, I heard that there are industry standards. Have you adopted them here? And then my last comment, I think, goes back to the ag data transparent piece. So not everyone is signed up for ADT. If you think of the origins of ADT, it started as a community farm group who was frustrated with how data was being used. And it has kind of evolved in a direction where not all of the industry agrees with that, right? Because at the end, transparency tells you how your data is going to be used. It does not give you any other control than saying, I'm not going to buy from you if you don't have the seal. So that's very similar to, you know, the tuna can industry, or the green seal, we're certified safe. So that's unfortunately the direction somewhat that ADT has gone into. Now there's still elements that are good, but it doesn't actually address the problem of making systems work together. So that's my piece. I took too much time, but thank you.
Thank you. So Glenn, we'll give you a break now, but I encourage everybody in the room that's got a thought with what government should do, they should go see Glenn after. But we'll go to Jake and then Andrew to wrap up with just kind of concluding thoughts on digital agriculture.
Yeah, I think probably the number one thing I can say here is, first off, I'm not sponsored by John Deere. We were a rainbow farm, and it was just the way our farm went. It was, you know, started with one piece and then went to another. So I have been through those frustrations, and we still do with interoperability. We have a CDOC and we have a CNH air tank. So we, like I said, we had to buy a bridge to get it to work. So there's that aspect. But I guess the next piece I would say is, you know, one of the kind of goals that when Dad and I talked about this to get to across the group here was that, you know, instead of looking at the barriers to entering a digital ag, look at some of the things you can implement and you can do or you can utilize right away. Because I feel that, you know, as farmers, like I said earlier, there are some things that we don't look at and we don't utilize that we already have access to. So, you know, trying to dig a little deeper and see how that can benefit your operation. That was probably one of the things that we wanted to come out of today.
Okay, and we'll give Andrew the last word on this.
Well, for me, if I could speak as a farmer, and I would say to government, I'd say you need to get on board with the next big thing, which will be green on green or See and Spray, the opportunity to save 70% of pesticide, herbicide. All those things will benefit the consumer, the public, the environment. Those are massive things, and we have the opportunity to do that. So I would call upon their support to follow down, research that, and make it affordable for everyone. Because right now it's the cost of doing that. We have the technology that'll work. It's just a case, it's a huge cost. But with support from provincial and federal governments, I'm sure that we'll all get to that level and retrofit on our equipment and be able to save some money and to help the environment.
Okay, thank you. And I think that this digital agriculture discussion is one that's going to keep on going for a long time. There's clearly a lot of potential, a lot of challenges that are there, but I think it's something worth talking about and continuing to talk about. Now, Colin gave me kind of 15 minutes. I'm not going to take it all for concluding remarks, but I wanted to try and kind of tie the discussion on drainage and the discussion on digital agriculture and some of the things you're doing, talking about with your resolutions together in this moment that we're in. So I think 2026 is going to be a tough year for a lot of Canadian farmers. We had an Outlook webinar last week where we looked at farm economics, farmer sentiment, policy and politics, and man, it is not looking great, right? I think that we have had, I think about my time as a political staffer under the Harper government, like there was a lot of good things that happened, but a lot of that was because it was good times in Canadian agriculture. I think the last 10 years have been relatively good times in Canadian agriculture. That doesn't mean that life's easy, but I think it's been easier than it will likely be. And the pressure on farm policy, on farm politics, on the choices that you as producers are going to have to make, but also the choices governments are going to have to make, are going to be a lot tougher. And it's an interesting time. We've got governments that are going to come together in July and make some decisions about the next 5 years, the next policy framework, what the priorities should be. Should they be any different than they are today? I think that there's a lot of opportunities for more focus in what that is, but part of that push towards focus means that farm groups are going to have to think through, as governments say that they've only got limited resources, if we've only got so much bandwidth, and we've got this all in a context of increased volatility and risk, that we need to think through, farm groups need to be thinking through, how do you go to governments and say this is what a focused agenda would look like? We understand that you can't do it all, but these are the spaces where we think you could have the most impact. Is it on setting standards for digital agriculture? Is it on better regulatory enforcement? Is it on kind of targeted investments in R&D and innovation? And I think that the government, federal governments, has sent a signal when they're closing research sites. I hope that that's not the end of the discussion around research and development and innovation. I think that should be a call to double down around the benefits for this investment, but we need to be thinking about it in the context of the choices that we're going to make. And I think that is the challenge for KAP and for others across the country, is how do we kind of meet this moment? We're in a tougher world. This is going to be a tougher year. We need to get better decisions, better outcomes. We need to do a better job holding government's feet to the fire to deliver on the things that we need them to deliver on. And hopefully we'll see some change. But this is a time where I think farm groups, farm leaders, good advocates on behalf of the sector are going to be needed this year more than they've been needed in a long time. And hopefully that sets the stage for some better outcomes in what looks like will be a tough year. So I appreciate the opportunity to come, and again, if anybody wants to talk about some of these big issues that are going to be facing the sector in 2026, I'll be around and look forward to keep talking about that. But I will hand the mic back over to you, Jill. I'm going to hand the mic over to Jill. Thank you very much, and good luck with the rest of your meeting.